The morning sun cast long shadows across the embassy courtyard as Officer Marcus Chen adjusted his tactical vest one final time. 3 years with the Metropolitan SWAT team had prepared him for many situations, but today felt different. Intelligence reports suggested a potential security threat at the British embassy, and his team had been called in to provide additional protection during a high-profile diplomatic meeting. Marcus had always prided himself on being thorough, methodical, and ready for anything. His colleagues respected his quick thinking and steady nerves under pressure. But as he surveyed the ornate building before him, something gnawed at his confidence. The mixing of American SWAT protocols with British security procedures created an unusual dynamic that made everyone slightly on edge. The briefing had been clear enough. His team would coordinate with the embassy's existing security, including the ceremonial royal guards who maintained their traditional posts. Marcus had studied the layout extensively, memorizing every entrance, exit, and potential vulnerability. The diplomatic meeting inside involved sensitive trade negotiations, making security paramount. Standing near the main entrance, Marcus noticed the stoic figure of a royal guard positioned at his ceremonial post. The guard stood perfectly still, his red uniform immaculate, his bearskin hat casting a shadow over his face. Something about the guard's positioning seemed off to Marcus, though he couldn't quite identify what bothered him. As the morning progressed, Marcus found himself repeatedly glancing toward the royal guard. The man hadn't moved in over 2 hours, which Marcus knew was part of their legendary discipline. However, his tactical training made him suspicious of anyone who remained completely motionless for extended periods. In his experience, even the most disciplined security personnel showed subtle signs of alertness and movement. The radio crackled with routine updates from his team members positioned around the perimeter. Everything appeared normal, but Marcus felt an increasing sense of unease. His instincts had saved lives before, and he had learned never to ignore them, even when logic suggested otherwise. Around noon, Marcus noticed a slight shift in the crowd gathered outside the embassy gates. Tourists and passers-by often stopped to photograph the royal guards, but today's crowd seemed different. More people lingered than usual, and some appeared to be observing the security arrangements rather than taking casual photos. The tension escalated when Marcus spotted an individual in the crowd making subtle hand signals to someone across the street. His training kicked in immediately. Every fiber of his being told him that something was about to happen, and the motionless royal guard was positioned directly in what could become a line of fire. Marcus keyed his radio to alert his team leader about his suspicions. But before he could speak, he saw a figure in dark clothing break away from the crowd and begin moving purposefully toward the embassy entrance. The person's movements were too deliberate, too focused, and Marcus realized he had seconds to react. Without hesitation, Marcus moved toward what he perceived as the threat. His eyes locked onto the royal guard, who remained perfectly still despite the approaching figure. In that split second, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Something about the guard's complete lack of reaction to the approaching individual triggered every alarm in Marcus's tactical mind. Time seemed to slow as Marcus processed multiple threat scenarios simultaneously. His hand moved instinctively toward his taser, muscle memory taking over as he prepared to neutralize what he believed was an imminent danger. The royal guard's absolute stillness now seemed less like discipline and more like a potential security breach. The approaching figure was now just meters away from the royal guard's position. Marcus could see that other tourists were beginning to notice the commotion, but none of them seemed to grasp the potential severity of the situation. His team members were still positioned at their assigned posts, unaware of the drama unfolding at the main entrance. In the crucial moment that followed, Marcus made a decision based on years of training and split-second threat assessment. He couldn't risk waiting to see if his suspicions were correct. The safety of everyone in the embassy, including the high-profile diplomats inside, hung in the balance. His finger found the trigger of his taser as he prepared to act on what he believed was a clear and present danger to embassy security. The taser's electrical discharge crackled through the air with a sharp, unmistakable sound that cut through the ambient noise of the busy street. Marcus watched in slow motion as the electrodes found their target, striking the royal guard squarely in the center of his red tunic. The crowd around the embassy gates gasped collectively. phones immediately appearing to capture the shocking scene unfolding before them. But what happened next defied every expectation Marcus had built up in his mind. Instead of the collapse, confusion, or aggressive response he anticipated from someone who might be a security threat, the Royal Guard's reaction was utterly extraordinary. The man's body tensed for just a fraction of a second as the electrical current coursed through him, yet he remained upright. The Royal Guard's feet stayed planted firmly in their precise position. His hands maintained their exact grip on his rifle. His head didn't turn, his eyes didn't blink, and his facial expression remained completely unchanged. It was as if the 50,000 volts of electricity had simply passed through him without any effect on his duty or bearing. Marcus stared in absolute disbelief. In his 3 years of SWAT experience, he had used tasers on suspects numerous times. Every single person had gone down immediately, their muscles seizing, their coordination completely disrupted. But this Royal Guard stood there as if nothing had happened, continuing his ceremonial duty with unwavering dedication. The figure that Marcus had perceived as a threat turned out to be a lost tourist asking for directions to Westminster Abbey. The man looked around in confusion at the sudden commotion, completely unaware that he had been the catalyst for this unprecedented incident. Other tourists began pointing and whispering, their cameras now focused entirely on the Royal Guard, who had just absorbed a taser hit without flinching. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the reality of his mistake became clear. He had just used a weapon on a ceremonial guard of the British Crown, an action that would undoubtedly create an international incident. His mind raced through the potential consequences: diplomatic fallout, career termination, possible criminal charges, and a humiliation that would follow him for the rest of his life. The other members of Marcus's SWAT team had heard the distinctive sound of the taser and were converging on his position. Their faces showed a mixture of confusion and concern as they tried to process what they were seeing. The Royal Guard continued to stand at perfect attention, the taser wires still attached to his uniform, as if this was just another ordinary moment in his duty. Radio chatter exploded across the security channels as embassy personnel tried to understand what had happened. Marcus could hear his team leader's voice calling for a situation report, but he found himself temporarily speechless. How could he explain that he had just tasered a Royal Guard, who was now demonstrating a level of discipline that seemed almost superhuman? The crowd outside the embassy had grown larger, drawn by the obvious drama of the situation. Social media posts were already beginning to spread, with hashtags about the incident starting to trend. Marcus realized that within minutes this moment would be broadcast around the world, potentially becoming an international embarrassment for both American and British security forces. Embassy staff members began emerging from the building, their faces showing alarm and confusion. A British security coordinator approached rapidly, speaking urgently into his radio while assessing the situation. Marcus could see the man's expression shift from concern to bewilderment as he took in the sight of the unflappable Royal Guard. The Royal Guard himself remained absolutely motionless. No twitch, no acknowledgement of the crowd, no sign that anything unusual had occurred. His breathing remained steady and controlled, his gaze fixed straight ahead, his posture perfect. The taser wires hung from his uniform like bizarre decorations, but they might as well have been invisible for all the reaction he showed. Marcus slowly holstered his taser, his hands shaking slightly as the magnitude of his error sank in. He had acted on instinct and training, but his threat assessment had been completely wrong. Now he stood facing a Royal Guard who was demonstrating a level of professional discipline that Marcus had never witnessed in his entire career. The whispers from the crowd grew louder as people began to realize they were witnessing something truly remarkable. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity or an accidental tasing. This was a display of human willpower and dedication to duty that transcended normal expectations of professional behavior. The British Embassy's head of security, Commander James Whitfield, arrived at the scene within minutes of the incident. His decades of experience in both military and diplomatic security had prepared him for many crisis situations, but the sight that greeted him was unlike anything in his extensive career. A Royal Guard stood at perfect attention with taser wires protruding from his red tunic, while an American SWAT officer stood nearby looking mortified. Commander Whitfield's first priority was damage control. The growing crowd of onlookers and the proliferation of smartphones meant that this incident would soon be global news. He needed to understand exactly what had happened while ensuring that the dignity of both the Royal Guard and the American security forces was maintained as much as possible. Under the circumstances, Marcus approached Commander Whitfield with visible reluctance, knowing that he needed to explain his actions but dreading the conversation. As he began to recount the sequence of events that led to his decision to use the taser, he watched Whitfield's expression shift from stern professionalism to amazement. The commander had served alongside Royal Guards for years, but even he seemed stunned by this demonstration of discipline. The Royal Guard, meanwhile, continued his duty as if the entire incident was merely a minor distraction. His eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his breathing steady and controlled. The taser's electrical charge had long since dissipated, but the wires remained attached to his uniform like a bizarre badge of honor. Not once did he acknowledge the growing crowd, the clicking cameras, or the increasingly urgent radio communications surrounding him. A medical team arrived to assess the Royal Guard's condition, but they faced an unprecedented challenge. How do you conduct a medical evaluation on someone who refuses to acknowledge your presence or break from their assigned position? The lead medic, Dr. Sarah Thompson, had treated taser injuries before, but never on someone who remained standing and appeared completely unaffected. Dr. Thompson approached carefully, speaking in calm, professional tones as she explained her need to check the guard's vital signs and assess any potential injuries from the electrical discharge. The Royal Guard gave no indication that he heard her words, maintaining his ceremonial stance with unwavering determination. His complete commitment to duty, even in these extraordinary circumstances, left the medical team unsure how to proceed. Commander Whitfield made the decision to contact the Guard's commanding officer. This situation had escalated beyond normal security protocols and required guidance from the highest levels of the Royal Guard hierarchy. While they waited for additional authority to arrive, the crowd continued to grow, and international media outlets began sending reporters to cover what was already being dubbed the unshakable Guard incident. Marcus found himself simultaneously admiring and feeling guilty about the Royal Guard's incredible display of discipline. The man had absorbed a full taser discharge and continued performing his duty without the slightest deviation from protocol. This level of dedication to service was something Marcus had rarely encountered, even among the most elite military units he had worked with during his career. The other members of Marcus's SWAT team gathered around to discuss the situation in hushed tones. They had all witnessed the incident, and none could quite believe what they had seen. Veterans of numerous high-stress operations found themselves questioning their understanding of human limitations and professional dedication. The Royal Guard had redefined their concept of duty and discipline. Embassy staff worked frantically to manage the public relations nightmare that was unfolding. Phone calls flew between Washington and London, as diplomatic channels buzzed with discussions about how to handle the incident. The last thing anyone wanted was for this mistake to damage the special relationship between the two nations. But the growing media attention made containment increasingly difficult. As the afternoon wore on, the Royal Guard's position remained unchanged. His fellow guards at other posts around the embassy maintained their own ceremonial duties, but Marcus could see subtle signs that they were aware of their colleagues' extraordinary situation. Their own discipline remained perfect, but there was an almost imperceptible sense of pride in their bearing. The crowd had grown to include military personnel from various nations who happened to be in London. Word of the incident had spread through military networks, and professional soldiers from around the world were coming to witness this remarkable display of dedication. Many veterans found themselves deeply moved by the Guard's unwavering commitment to his post. Dr. Thompson finally managed to check the Guard's pulse by carefully positioning her fingers on his wrist, while he maintained his grip on his rifle. His heart rate was steady and strong, showing no signs of distress or medical emergency. His breathing remained controlled and regular, as if the taser incident had been nothing more than a brief summer breeze. Colonel Henry Ashworth, the commanding officer of the Royal Guards Regiment, arrived at the embassy with a mixture of concern and curiosity. In his 30-year military career, he had never received a phone call quite like the one that summoned him to this unprecedented situation. As he approached the scene, he could see the crowd, the media vehicles, and, most remarkably, one of his guards standing perfectly at attention with taser wires still attached to his uniform. The colonel recognized the guard immediately as Guardsman William Hayes. a 24-year-old soldier who had joined the regiment 18 months earlier. Hayes had consistently demonstrated exceptional dedication to duty, but even Colonel Ashworth was astounded by this display of unwavering commitment. He had trained thousands of guards over the years, but none had ever faced a test quite like this one. Colonel Ashworth approached slowly, observing Hayes with professional admiration. The young guard's posture remained flawless, his grip on his rifle unchanged, his gaze fixed steadily ahead. The taser wires hanging from his red tunic seemed almost absurd against the backdrop of his perfect military bearing. The colonel had seen guards maintain their posts through thunderstorms, protests, and various disruptions, but this was extraordinary even by Royal Guard standards. Marcus watched nervously as the commanding officer assessed the situation. He expected anger, demands for explanations, or at minimum a stern reprimand for his actions. Instead, Colonel Ashworth's expression showed something closer to wonder and professional respect for his subordinates. Incredible demonstration of discipline and duty. The media presence had grown exponentially throughout the day. International news crews were setting up equipment, while reporters prepared to broadcast live updates about the Taser Guard story that was captivating audiences worldwide. Social media had exploded with videos, memes, and commentary about the incident, with many people expressing amazement at the guard's unshakable dedication. Dr. Thompson briefed Colonel Ashworth on her medical assessment, explaining that despite the unusual circumstances, Guardsman Hayes appeared to be in excellent physical condition. His vital signs remained steady, and he showed no adverse effects from the electrical discharge. However, she expressed concern about the psychological impact of maintaining such rigid discipline for extended periods under these circumstances. Colonel Ashworth made a decision that surprised everyone present. Rather than immediately relieving Hayes of his duty or addressing the taser situation, he positioned himself near the guard and spoke in a clear, authoritative voice that carried across the courtyard. His words were directed at Hayes, but everyone present could hear them clearly. "Guardsman Hayes," the colonel announced, "your dedication to duty today has brought honor to the regiment and exemplified the highest traditions of the Royal Guards. Your conduct under these extraordinary circumstances represents the finest qualities of military service and personal discipline." The crowd fell silent as they witnessed this moment of military recognition. Even the media crews paused their preparations to listen to the colonel's words. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions as he realized that his mistake had inadvertently created a moment that highlighted the extraordinary character of the man he had tasered. Hayes gave no outward acknowledgement of his commanding officer's words, maintaining his ceremonial stance with the same unwavering dedication he had shown throughout the entire ordeal. His eyes remained fixed ahead, his breathing steady, his posture perfect. The only indication that he had heard the colonel was a subtle, almost imperceptible straightening of his already perfect posture. Colonel Ashworth then turned to address Marcus directly. The SWAT officer braced himself for criticism or formal complaints about his actions. Instead, the colonel extended his hand in a gesture of respect and understanding. He acknowledged that Marcus had been acting according to his training and instincts, trying to protect everyone present from what he perceived as a potential threat. The colonel's gracious response surprised Marcus and provided some relief from the guilt and embarrassment he had been carrying since the incident began. However, Marcus remained deeply impressed by Guardsman Hayes's extraordinary reaction to being tasered. He had never witnessed such complete dedication to duty, and it changed his understanding of what professional discipline could achieve. As evening approached, the question of when and how to end Hayes's duty shift became increasingly complex. Normally, Royal Guards were relieved according to a precise schedule, but these circumstances were far from normal. The taser wires still needed to be removed, medical protocols required completion, and the media attention showed no signs of diminishing. The incident had taken on a life of its own, becoming a symbol of dedication, professionalism, and the power of unwavering commitment to duty. People from around the world were following the story, and many were expressing admiration for both the Guards' discipline and the professional way all parties were handling the unusual situation. As the sun began to set over London, the crowd around the British Embassy had swelled to hundreds of people. What had started as a security incident had transformed into something resembling a pilgrimage, with people coming from across the city to witness Guardsman Hayes's remarkable display of duty and discipline. The atmosphere had shifted from one of shock and confusion to genuine admiration and respect. International media coverage had reached fever pitch, with news anchors struggling to find adequate words to describe the unprecedented situation. Military historians were being interviewed about the traditions and training of the Royal Guards, while psychologists attempted to explain the mental fortitude required to maintain such discipline under extraordinary circumstances. Marcus found himself in an increasingly surreal position. What had begun as his worst professional nightmare was evolving into something entirely different. Military personnel from various nations approached him throughout the day, not to criticize his actions, but to discuss the incredible character of the man he had accidentally tested with his taser. His mistake had revealed something remarkable about human dedication and professional excellence. Commander Whitfield coordinated with Colonel Ashworth to develop a plan for managing the situation's conclusion. They agreed that Hayes deserved to complete his scheduled duty period with full honors, despite the unusual circumstances. The taser wires would be carefully removed during the formal changing of the guard ceremony, allowing Hayes to finish his post with dignity intact. Dr. Thompson continued monitoring Hayes throughout the day, conducting unobtrusive medical checks to ensure his continued well-being. She documented everything meticulously, knowing that this incident would likely be studied in medical journals for years to come. Never before had she observed someone maintain such complete physical and mental control after receiving a full taser discharge. The diplomatic implications of the incident were being managed at the highest levels of government. Rather than becoming a source of tension between Britain and America, the situation was fostering a sense of mutual respect and admiration. Both nations' officials recognized that they were witnessing something extraordinary that transcended normal political considerations. As Hayes's shift neared its scheduled end, preparations began for what would undoubtedly be the most watched changing of the guard ceremony in history. Television crews from dozens of countries positioned themselves for optimal coverage, while the crowd pressed closer to witness the conclusion of this remarkable demonstration of duty. The relief guard, Guardsman Robert Sterling, arrived in full ceremonial dress, fully briefed on the situation, but maintaining the solemn dignity appropriate to the occasion. Sterling had volunteered for this assignment, understanding the honor of participating in what had become a historic moment for the Royal Guards. Regiment Marcus positioned himself where he could observe the ceremony while staying out of the way of the formal proceedings. He had spent the day reflecting on the lessons of his mistake and gained a profound appreciation for the standards of excellence that some people achieve in their professional lives. Hayes had taught him something about dedication that no training manual could have conveyed. Colonel Ashworth announced that the changing of the guard would proceed according to traditional protocols, with one addition. The ceremony would include a formal recognition of Guardsman Hayes's exceptional service under extraordinary circumstances. This recognition would become part of the regiment's official records and would be remembered in Royal Guards tradition for generations to come. The crowd fell silent as the formal ceremony began. Every movement was executed with precision and dignity, the familiar ritual taking on special significance given the day's events. When the moment came to remove the taser wires, it was done with the same careful attention to detail that characterized every aspect of Royal Guards protocol. Hayes maintained his perfect posture throughout the wire removal process, giving no indication of relief or acknowledgement of the unusual situation that was finally concluding. His eyes remained fixed ahead, his breathing steady, his bearing unchanged from the moment Marcus had first noticed him that morning. When Guardsman Sterling took his position, and Hayes was formally relieved of duty, the crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. This was not the typical silent respect accorded to Royal Guard ceremonies, but rather an outpouring of genuine admiration for an extraordinary display of human character and professional dedication. Hayes executed his formal departure with the same precision he had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. His march away from the post was flawless, his bearing dignified, his conduct exemplary. Only when he had disappeared from public view did he finally allow himself to acknowledge what had been an unprecedented test of his commitment to duty. The days following the incident brought unexpected developments for everyone involved. The story had captured global attention, with news outlets around the world featuring detailed analyses of what was being called The ultimate test of duty. Military academies began incorporating the incident into their curriculum as an example of exceptional professional discipline and dedication to service. Marcus received a formal commendation from his SWAT commander, not for his tactical decision-making, but for his professional handling of the aftermath and his willingness to learn from the experience. His mistake had inadvertently created a teaching moment that was being studied by law enforcement and military personnel worldwide. The incident had sparked important discussions about threat assessment, international cooperation, and the highest standards of professional behavior. Guardsman Hayes found himself reluctantly thrust into the spotlight. Though he handled the attention with the same quiet dignity he had shown during the incident itself, military officials from around the world requested meetings with him, wanting to understand the training and mindset that had enabled such an extraordinary display of discipline. Universities invited him to speak about dedication and perseverance. The Royal Guards Regiment received thousands of letters and emails from people inspired by Hayes's conduct. Children wrote essays about his example. Veterans shared stories of their own service, and ordinary citizens expressed their admiration for his unwavering commitment to duty. The regiment's recruiting offices reported a significant increase in applications from young people, motivated by Hayes's example. Dr. Thompson published a detailed medical case study of the incident, documenting the physiological and psychological aspects of Hayes's response to the taser. Her research contributed to better understanding of human stress responses and the relationship between mental discipline and physical resilience. Medical schools began using her findings to teach about the mind-body connection. The British Embassy implemented new security protocols based on lessons learned from the incident. These improvements enhanced coordination between different security forces and clarified procedures for handling unusual situations. The changes were shared with diplomatic missions worldwide, contributing to improved security practices globally. Marcus and Hayes eventually met privately, away from media attention, in a conversation arranged by Colonel Ashworth. The meeting was surprisingly comfortable, with both men acknowledging the unique circumstances that had brought them together. Hayes thanked Marcus for acting according to his training and instincts, while Marcus expressed his profound respect for Hayes's demonstration of professional excellence. During their conversation, Hayes revealed that maintaining his post during the incident had been challenging, but not impossible. His training had prepared him for various disruptions and distractions, and he had simply applied those principles to an unusual situation. He emphasized that his response reflected the standards expected of all Royal Guards, not exceptional personal qualities. The incident prompted discussions at the highest levels of government about the value of traditional military ceremonies and the character they develop in service members. Political leaders from multiple countries praised both the Royal Guards standards and the professional cooperation demonstrated by all parties involved in managing the situation. Marcus found that the experience had profoundly changed his approach to his work. He developed a deeper appreciation for the dedication required to maintain the highest professional standards, regardless of circumstances. His colleagues noticed his increased attention to detail and his enhanced respect for the traditions and protocols that guide professional behavior. The story continued to resonate in popular culture, inspiring books, documentaries, and even a feature film proposal. Hayes declined all entertainment offers, preferring to let his actions speak for themselves. He returned to his regular duties with the same quiet professionalism that had characterized his service before the incident. Educational institutions began using the incident as a case study in ethics, leadership, and professional behavior. Business schools discussed the implications of unwavering commitment to standards, while military academies analyzed the training methods that could produce such remarkable discipline. The story became a touchstone for discussions about excellence and character. The relationship between British and American security forces was strengthened by the professional way all parties handled the incident. Joint training exercises were scheduled to improve coordination and understanding between different security organizations. The incident had demonstrated both the potential for misunderstanding and the power of mutual respect and professionalism to overcome challenges. 1 year after the incident, both Marcus and Hayes had moved forward in their careers. forever connected by the extraordinary moment that had tested them both in unexpected ways. The anniversary of what media had dubbed Taser Tuesday brought renewed attention to their story, but both men had learned to handle public interest with grace and professionalism. Marcus had been promoted within his SWAT unit, partly due to his enhanced understanding of international security protocols and his improved threat assessment skills. The incident had taught him valuable lessons about cultural differences in security approaches and the importance of understanding the context of unfamiliar situations. His training programs now included components about working with international security forces. Hayes continued his service with the Royal Guards, having been selected for advanced leadership training based on his demonstrated character and composure under pressure. His commanders recognized that his response to the Taser incident reflected exactly the kind of unshakable reliability they sought in their senior personnel. He was being groomed for positions of greater responsibility within the regiment. The annual ceremony commemorating the incident had become a tradition at the British Embassy, serving as a reminder of the highest standards of professional conduct and international cooperation. Diplomats, military personnel, and security professionals from around the world attended the event, which featured presentations on duty, discipline, and the power of maintaining professional standards under extraordinary circumstances. Dr. Thompson's research on the incident had contributed to significant advances in understanding human stress responses and mental resilience. Her work was being applied in training programs for emergency responders, military personnel, and others who face high-stress situations. The incident had provided unique data that was improving preparation and performance standards across multiple professions. The story had inspired countless individuals to pursue careers in military and public service. Recruitment offices for various services reported that many applicants specifically mentioned Hayes's example as motivation for their decision to serve. Military academies noted improved standards of conduct and discipline among cadets who had studied the incident. As part of their training, Marcus often reflected on how a moment of mistaken judgment had led to such profound personal and professional growth. He had learned that true professionalism sometimes meant acknowledging mistakes while also recognizing the extraordinary character in others. His relationship with international security partners had been strengthened by his willingness to learn from the experience. The friendship that had developed between Marcus and Hayes had become a symbol of how professional relationships could transcend cultural boundaries in challenging circumstances. They corresponded regularly, sharing insights about their respective careers and the ongoing impact of their shared experience. Their mutual respect had grown into genuine friendship based on shared values of service and excellence. Educational institutions continued to study the incident as an example of crisis management, professional behavior, and international cooperation. Business schools examined the leadership lessons, while psychology departments analyzed the mental discipline required for Hayes's response. The story had become a standard case study in multiple academic disciplines. The incident had also influenced popular culture, inspiring novels, documentaries, and motivational speeches about dedication and perseverance. While Hayes remained reluctant to participate in most media projects, he occasionally spoke at military academies and leadership conferences, sharing insights about the training and mindset that had enabled his remarkable response. Both men had come to understand that their brief encounter had created something larger than either of them individually. The story had become a symbol of human potential, professional excellence, and the power of maintaining standards regardless of circumstances. Their experience continued to inspire others to pursue the highest levels of personal and professional conduct. The legacy of that remarkable day lived on in improved training programs, stronger international relationships, and countless individuals who had been motivated to pursue excellence in their own lives. What had begun as a security incident had evolved into a lasting testament to the character that emerges when ordinary people face extraordinary circumstances with unwavering commitment to their duty and principles. Years later, both Marcus and Hayes would look back on that day as a defining moment in their lives, not because of the dramatic circumstances, but because of what it had revealed about human potential and the power of maintaining professional standards. Their story continued to inspire new generations of service members and reminded everyone that true excellence emerges not from perfection, but from unwavering dedication, to doing what is right regardless of the circumstances.